Thank you, Mr. President. I commend the bill's author and the great work that has been done. In this bill, we'll be raising judicial salaries up, some to as much as $240,000, well deserved. However, our governor only makes $175,000. The mayor of our capital city, they just approved the raise, makes $237,000 or $36,000 a year, but the governor of the entire state only makes $175,000. That doesn't make good sense. So this simply sets the governor's salary at $250,000, which I believe is most appropriate, but then it falls in line with our constitutional officers and the Speaker of the House. So whether it be our Lieutenant Governor, the Speaker of the House, the Attorney General, the Insurance Commissioner, all those folks that are statewide elected, although I did not bring the PSC involved, would then be 80% of the governor's salary to have logic parity put into place with a percentage. It's simply that. It's a very small amount of money, but I think it actually will bring us up to where we need to be. If you look at all the constitutional officers and speakers, the Speaker of the House, they have staff making sometimes twice as much money as them. That really doesn't make good sense. So this is a very simple amendment, simply adjusting the governor's salary and making those at 80%, and I'm glad to yield for questions. Okay. Sure.
You do have a couple questions, Senator. I recognize the Senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, do you yield?
Always from my friend, the Rules Chairman.
Thank you, Public Safety Chairman. I'm just curious, we're giving Governor a decent raise, giving the Lieutenant Governor a 4 times raise, doubling the salary of the Commissioner, Ag Commissioner, almost doubling the salary of the Attorney General, doubling the salary of the Commissioner of Insurance, and doubling the salary of the Commissioner of Labor and School Superintendent and Secretary of State. Have you had any conversations with any of these?
I've actually
if so,
talked
which ones?
Well, what you're saying, though, I believe what you're understanding in this bill and what is actual is different. The numbers you see in this bill in other budgeting bills over the year have actually added to each one of these salaries. So what you see here is actually not factual. A lot of them are getting $130,000, $140,000 a year or more. This was the base one that was set in the law, but over years, all these little things have been done to bring their salaries up. So what you're saying, I understand by the bill you would see that, but that's actually not actual, and I have talked to many, but not all, of the statewide elected officers about this, yes.
Would you further yield?
Certainly.
Which ones?
I don't want to call them out right now, but I'll probably walk over there just so they don't get thrown under the bus later. How about that?
Would you further yield?
I would be glad to.
Why would you not want to call them out if you talk to them and they're good with it? Why would they not want to talk
because
about
I think sometimes people don't want to be accused of supporting their own pay raises.
They just want us to do it. Is that not true?
That would definitely be true, Mr. Chairman. I think that's been the way for us in either local legislation, for our local elected officials, and even right now for what we're passing for the judges.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Recognize the Senator from the 55th.
Will the gentleman yield?
Certainly.
I ask you this question, and I'm going to ask it because I support the spirit of your bill. I think our governor is entitled to that and more, dealing with a $40 billion budget. However, has the discussion came up about senators and representatives who are not wealthy coming on this train for at least some percentage of whatever the distinguished leader of this state does in fact make, so that people are not just the wealthy in this place? Has that been a consideration?
Senator, thank you for bringing that up. I'm sure that that's something that each and every senator for themselves can decide to do at any given time, but this is laser focused on the folks that are working very diligently from the governor on down and the highest elected officials to make sure we're in some reasonable parity for what they're doing. Even with this raise, compared to the private marketplace, they would be woefully underpaid. But there's also a sacrifice when you serve in public office. And I'm okay with making that sacrifice like I'm sure they are, but I think this gets us to a more reasonable spot to be consistent with even the cities, counties, judgeships, district attorneys, and sheriffs that we already have as elected officials in the state.
Will the gentleman further yield?
Gladly.
Would you agree with me that the senators in this place and the representatives are entitled to at least 1/2 of what the governor does in fact is salaried?
Well, Senator, I would leave that up to each and every member to make up their mind on that one.
Would you think that at least 40% of whatever the governor makes, it should be what legislators are paid?
That would probably be a little bit too rich for my theory, but again, that's each and every person's decision to make and what they think that they're worth in serving as a Georgia State Senator.
Would the gentleman further yield?
I'd be glad to.
Would you agree with me that we cannot have a adequate staff with only $7,000 worth of expense money to serve in this distinguished and august body?
Well, Senator, I couldn't agree with you more. The amount set forth for staff that we have today, as well as the legislative accounts, are out of date. The last time our legislative accounts were adjusted were over 25 years ago. And the amount of staff we've had is consistent when Georgia had 1 million people, and now we have, by best estimation, slightly over 11. So I do think it's something we should look at, but we want to keep our government lean. We want to keep our government be most efficient, but I do believe, based on the number of people we represent, that we should have more help, because ultimately that helps our constituents. And I'd love to have more constituent services available to them as well.
Would the gentleman support an amendment to just have staff if the gentleman is not interested in supporting the actual increase of pay to legislators? Would the gentleman agree with doing an amendment that would only increase the amount of staff so that we could adequately do our jobs rather than not having staff to serve our districts?
I appreciate the offer. I do not believe that would fall into this code section. I think we'd have to do a separate bill, but I'd be glad to work with you on that.
The gentleman is very kind to even take the question. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Recognize Senator from 26.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
Certainly for my good friend.
Senator, as we look at all of this that we have, who puts the work in to draw it up?
Who puts the work in, Senator? I think it's, it's first our constituents who work every day to support their families and pay taxes, and it's incumbent upon all of us that serve in different areas of government to provide them phenomenal customer service and a great place to live, work, play, and raise a family.
Senator Further Yield.
Certainly.
Senator, who draws the bill up and the amendment for these folks who are getting the increase?
I'm sorry, Senator, I didn't understand your question.
I say, who draws the bills, sponsor the bills, put in the amendments for all these other folks?
You're right, Senator. It's us right here in the Georgia State Senate and House of Representatives.
So, Senator, wouldn't you agree that we as a whole need to look at the various compensation bills that we do in here? Need to consider those folks who get the bills drawn, get them sponsored, and work like HELL to get them passed.
I agree with you, Senator. We definitely need to look at that. Thank you so much.
Recognize the Senator from the 48th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
Certainly for my good friend.
In keeping with the line of questioning from the senator from the 55th, would you support a future measure? I, but a humble pool boy, my seatmate, a humble farmer, maybe just eliminating our salaries altogether and we could all just serve here on a voluntary basis?
Well, you know, Senator, I think that's for each and every one of us to decide. I, for most of my entire legislative career, donate my legislative salary to local charities, and I would encourage everyone who's able to do the exact same. Even gentlemen farmers and humble pool boys.
Recognize the senator from the 24th.
Does the senator yield for a couple of questions?
Certainly.
Senator, isn't it true that every elected official, when they qualify to run for office, knows what they're going to get paid?
I believe that to be true. I hope so.
And isn't it true that have any of these, the governor, the lieutenant governor, the labor commissioner, ag commissioner, any of these statewide officers, has any of these come to a committee meeting to be asked to have a raise?
Well, I don't believe this was up in front of any committee. It's an amendment. What I learned is any salary bills have to be dropped in the first 10 days of the legislative session. So when we were working on this, we realized we were unable to do that. That's why we're doing it now. And also there is certain times to do this. We're going to have a bunch of folks in this room running for statewide office next year. And when they do, they're not going to want to vote for anything that would perceive them to be in a box. So it'll be 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years now before we're doing it again. And I think it's time that we stood up and said this is the right thing to do because it's woefully out of date.
Thank you.
Recognize the senator from the 41st.
Thank you. Does Senator yield?
Certainly for the minority whip.
Thank you. So I think you may have answered that question, but isn't it true that we typically do salary increases to be effective for the next election cycle, not during the time when people are seated in the position? Isn't that true?
Senator, I'm not sure that that's accurate. I think oftentimes we're changing salaries both on the local and state level on a regular basis. What we've just done is we've ignored these for a very long time, and I think that's the problem.
Senator, do you further yield?
Certainly.
Certainly, I agree. I mean, my name is on this amendment. I agree with the sentiment here. I think I am trying to express that there's some unreadiness in my own spirit about giving isn't it true that there's some unreadiness in my own spirit about giving a raise that would be effective July 2025 versus waiting until new folks are in office? Isn't it true?
Senator, you know what? I would understand exactly what you're saying, and if you want to put Amendment 1A to make that effective date, I would be happy to support it.
Yeah.
Recognize the senator from the 27th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Chairman, do you yield?
Certainly.
I just wanted to let you know, isn't it true that I spoke with the author of the House bill on this, and he is not supportive. I'm wondering if you had the opportunity to discuss this with him, because in full transparency, his concern is that the judge pay for him is a priority, and he fears this may put the bill in jeopardy. And so I'm just wondering if that...
Senator, I don't doubt what you say. A couple of other folks told me that that person was actually okay with agreeing to it, so perhaps we're getting conflicting information.
Okay. Great. Do you know... well, that probably ends my questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
You have no further questions, senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just say before I sit down, we can find a reason each and every year to not do these things. But this is the right time and the right year to do this. I want to remind you again, the mayor of our capital city, which represents about 500,000 people, makes $236,000. The governor, who represents 11 million people, makes $61,000 less. Think about that for just a moment. That is just not right. We shouldn't have people be paid so far out of balance, even though knowing that in the private marketplace, without a doubt, they would get paid multiples more. I think this strikes a nice balance and gets us on the right path, tying it to a percentage in the future, and I ask for your favorable vote. Thank you.
Senators yield.